Welcome back to Senior Health Stories, your trusted companion for living healthier and happier in your golden years. We're here to share expert tips, practical advice, and inspiring stories to help seniors thrive, no matter their age. Did you ever believe that regular health checkups are the key to living longer, living healthier? I used to believe that too. I used to think, as long as I go for my checkups, get all the blood work, scans, tests done, I can rest easy. I'm protecting my health. Until one day, I witnessed something that changed how I see it. An older gentleman, 78 years old, cheerful, active, walked out of his routine health check smiling, joking with his family. The next morning, he woke up unable to move half his body, unable to speak. His family panicked and called 911. At the hospital, the doctors said it was a stroke, possibly triggered by a sudden blood pressure spike after the contrast dye used in his scan. No one had warned him or his family. Let me ask you, have you ever been afraid that one day you won't be able to lift your grandchild, tend your little backyard garden, or cook those warm, loving meals for your family? Have you ever pictured yourself waking up one morning, your body not responding, legs weak, hands numb, unable to get out of bed on your own? Or worse, becoming a burden on your children, needing help to shower, to eat, to live, losing that precious independence? I'm not asking these questions to scare you. I'm asking so you understand. Sometimes the things we think are keeping us safe can carry hidden risks, especially if we don't fully understand them. I'm not here to frighten you. I'm not here to make you fear doctors or avoid hospitals. I'm here to give you power. Because I believe growing older doesn't mean growing weaker, doesn't mean giving up. It's the time when you deserve to know the truth, to take charge of your health, to live well, live joyfully, live freely, without constant fear hanging over you. And I'm here to help you do just that. There are things we assume are safe, even necessary, like medical tests many folks over 60 believe are essential to prevent disease. But did you know some tests, like CT scans with contrast dye, MRIs with gadolinium, or treadmill stress tests, can cause sudden blood pressure spikes, vessel constriction, or even trigger small clots? For a younger body, it might be no big deal, but after 60, everything changes. I still remember Harold, 81 years old, a cheerful man, drove himself to the hospital for a simple stomach check because of mild indigestion. The doctor suggested extra tests, just to be sure. He went home that night, had dinner with his family, laughed and joked as usual. 2 days later, he collapsed in the living room. His mouth drooped, his words slurred, his limbs went weak. At the hospital, we diagnosed him with an ischemic stroke. The likely cause? The stress from the earlier tests, causing unexpected swings in his blood pressure, on top of aging, delicate blood vessels.
When we're young, our bodies work like a well-oiled machine. Our blood vessels are like brand new rubber bands, stretchy, flexible, able to handle sudden changes. But after we pass 60, those rubber bands start to stiffen. They don't bounce back the way they used to. They don't adjust to pressure shifts as easily. Every time you stand up too quickly, hold your breath to lift something heavy, or even go through a medical scan you thought was harmless, your body is working much harder behind the scenes to keep balance. Take something like a CT scan with contrast dye. You're injected with a substance to make the images clearer, but that dye can speed up your heart, raise your blood pressure, and force your kidneys to work overtime to flush it out. If you're young and healthy, you might walk away just fine. But if you already have high blood pressure, diabetes, fragile arteries, that's a very different story. Or an MRI with gadolinium, which can linger in your body if your kidneys aren't filtering well. Or a stress test. What seems like just walking on a treadmill is actually pushing your heart to its max. Even a light sedation for a scope or procedure can drop your blood pressure, mess with your heart rhythm. The point here isn't that these tests are bad, it's that as we get older, even small shocks to the system can break a delicate balance. And if you already have plaque buildup or narrowed vessels, that can be the moment a blood clot forms. That's when a stroke happens, without warning, without choice. And this is what we need to recognize and prevent before the price is a part of your body, your memory, or your precious independence. Not everyone faces the same risk. Some folks at 70 are still biking up mountains. Others feel dizzy just bending to pull a weed. Who's most at risk during routine tests? Those living with high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, high cholesterol, or weak kidneys. People who've woken up feeling lightheaded or blacked out briefly when standing. Or people who forget to hydrate, letting their bodies silently dry out overnight. I'll never forget Dennis, 72, a fun, music-loving man who stretched his neck every morning after sleep. One day, he felt a tiny pop behind his ear. He thought, just a joint cracking, no big deal. But hours later, his right side felt weak. His speech started slurring. By the time we saw him at the hospital, he'd had a minor stroke caused by a tiny tear in a stiffened neck vessel, triggered just from that morning stretch. These stories aren't rare. A dry morning, a little too much strain during a test, a held breath while lifting a box. Sometimes, it's the last drop that overflows the cup. What breaks my heart isn't that people grow weaker, it's that they were never warned. They never knew they were high risk. And often all it would have taken was something small. A sip of water, a slower movement, a simple question to the doctor, and everything could have been different. I'm not here today to scare you, to make you think aging is just one trap after another. I'm here for something much simpler, to remind you that you have the right to own your life. You were not born just to be a quiet patient, nodding at every doctor's order. You were born to be a partner in your own care. Too often, I meet patients with tired, worried eyes, and when I ask, "Do you have any questions?" they just shake their heads, "I'll just do whatever you say, doctor." But they forget, this is their body. This is their health. They have the right to understand, to ask, to choose. I don't want you to be one of those people. I want you to leave your appointments feeling in charge, feeling confident, feeling like you know what you're doing and why, and how to protect yourself. Getting older doesn't mean giving up joy. It doesn't mean surrendering. It's a stage to savor the simple things, holding your grandchild, chatting with friends, tending your garden, learning something new. It's a time to grow, gently, deeply. But to do all that, you need to protect your health. And above all, you need to hold on to your right to know, to ask, to be part of every decision about your own body. That's the foundation for a life of joy, of connection, of true peace of mind.
Harold, 81, was a cheerful man who loved the simple joys of family life. One day, his doctor recommended a CT scan with contrast dye to check some mild stomach pain. Harold didn't think twice. Better safe than sorry, he thought. That afternoon, he had the scan, came home smiling, laughing with his grandkids, with no idea that inside his body, something dangerous had quietly begun. Contrast dye helps doctors see images clearer, but for older adults with heart disease, high blood pressure, or fragile blood vessels, it can trigger vessel spasms, sudden pressure changes, and force the heart and brain to work overtime. The next morning, Harold felt a little tired. He blamed the weather. By afternoon, he collapsed. His arms and legs went numb, his mouth drooped, and he couldn't speak. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed a stroke from a small blood clot, likely set off by the body's reaction to the contrast dye. I tell you this not to scare you, but to encourage you to ask. When your doctor suggests a CT scan with contrast, ask, is the contrast really necessary? Could we do the scan without it? Given my health conditions, is it safe for me? You have the right to ask. You deserve an explanation, and you deserve to choose what's right for your body. Harold wished he had asked. I hope you will, so you can keep your health, your joy, and those precious moments with the people you love. Margaret, 74, was once full of energy. She loved walking her dog, gardening, even biking in the park. Last year, during a routine checkup, her doctor suggested a stress test to see how her heart handled pressure. Margaret had no chest pain, no shortness of breath, no fatigue. But when the doctor said, just to be sure, she agreed. On the treadmill, they started gently, then asked her to speed up. Within minutes, her head spun, her heart raced, her face flushed. They stopped, checked her blood pressure, and everything seemed okay. But the next morning, Margaret woke up with weakness in her right arm. Her mouth felt stiff. Her speech was slurred. At the hospital, doctors diagnosed a mild stroke, likely from a sudden blood pressure spike that caused a small brain vessel to rupture. Since then, Margaret has changed. She learned to ask, do I really need this test if I have no symptoms? Is there a gentler, safer way to check my heart? She now chooses simpler checks, like resting EKGs, heart ultrasounds, and most importantly, listening to her own body. I hope Margaret's story reminds you, you don't have to prove you're strong by pushing through everything, and you never have to stay silent if you have questions. Your health, your choice. Nancy, 78, was beloved in her neighborhood, always caring for her garden, cooking for sick neighbors, never saying no to someone in need. But after a routine endoscopy to check mild stomach pain, her life changed. The doctor said, don't worry, just light sedation. But for an older adult on blood thinners, sedation isn't so simple. When Nancy woke up, her head spun, her tongue felt thick, and her speech was garbled. Her family panicked, rushed her to the ER. She'd had a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke, a warning sign. Doctors explained, sedation can suddenly drop blood pressure, slow circulation, and raise clot risk, especially in someone with fragile vessels or blood thinner use. Since then, Nancy asks carefully, can we do this procedure without sedation? Should I stop any meds beforehand? Is there another safe alternative? Nancy didn't stop getting care, she just stopped accepting everything without question. She learned, asking questions, understanding your options, is the first step to protecting your health and keeping your joy of living. Dennis, 80, was an optimistic man. Proud he still exercised and drove himself to the store. One day, he had some mild back pain, and his doctor suggested an MRI. Dennis thought, it's just a scan, no big deal. He agreed without asking more. After the MRI, Dennis sat in his car to rest. Within minutes, his head spun, his hands trembled, his heart raced.
He barely called his son for help. That evening, Dennis was in the hospital. Tests revealed he had early-stage kidney disease, undiagnosed, and the gadolinium contrast from the MRI had strained his kidneys, causing temporary filtering issues. What haunted Dennis wasn't just the scare, it was the thought, if I had asked ahead, could this have been avoided? Now Dennis always asks, do I need a kidney check first? Can we do this MRI without contrast? What are the risks at my age? He realized good health at his age isn't just luck. It's knowing how to protect himself. That's the message I hope reaches you today. Helen, 82, was a lively woman. She loved her garden, cooking for family, chatting with friends. During a routine check, her doctor suggested a carotid ultrasound to screen for stroke risk. Helen was healthy, had no dizziness, no numbness, no symptoms. She thought, why not? Extra check can't hurt. The scan showed 60% narrowing in one neck artery. Helen panicked. The doctor recommended surgery to prevent a stroke. Her family, scared, agreed. But on the operating table, Helen suffered a minor stroke when a small clot dislodged during the procedure. She survived, but afterwards, her speech was harder, her steps slower, and her confidence, her sense of freedom, was never the same. Helen told me during rehab, I wish I had asked more questions. I didn't know mild narrowing can often be watched with lifestyle changes and medication instead of rushing to surgery. Her story isn't meant to frighten you, it's to remind you the right to ask, to understand, to decide, that's yours. And sometimes one small question can be the key to holding on to the life you cherish.
When I sit down and talk with older adults, what I hear most often isn't that they fear dying. What they fear is losing themselves. They fear waking up one morning, looking in the mirror, and no longer recognizing the face staring back. They fear hands that can no longer hold a warm bowl of soup, legs too shaky to step into the garden and breathe in the smell of freshly cut grass. They fear a morning that no longer begins with birdsong at the window, but instead with the beep of a blood pressure cuff, the rattle of pills on the nightstand. I remember Mr. Walter, 85, who used to proudly drive himself to church every Sunday. After a mild stroke from a medical test he didn't fully understand, Walter now uses a wheelchair. He told me, "Doctor, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of becoming a burden to my wife. She's 5 years younger than me, and now she has to push me everywhere." And there's Mrs. Eileen, who used to spend long afternoons raking leaves in the yard, then sipping tea by the window, watching the world go by. After a minor stroke, she no longer dares to bend over to pick things up, afraid of dizziness, afraid of falling. She said, "Losing my independence, losing these simple joys, that's the deepest loss." These fears aren't just about health, they're about losing connection, losing the sense of still having purpose, of still being a vibrant part of their family, their community. And when we understand that, we see why asking questions, understanding risks, protecting yourself isn't just about survival. It's about preserving the right to live fully, with meaning, with dignity. But amid these fears, what moves me most in older adults is their deep wish to live each day to the fullest. I'll never forget Mrs. Margaret, 74, sitting by the window, telling me how she was practicing rewriting her old poems just to keep her memory sharp. She said, "I don't want to just survive, I want to enjoy life." And I once heard Mr. Harold, after recovering from a mild stroke, share something so simple yet so profound. He said, "Doctor, I don't need to climb mountains or travel the world. I just want to wake up in the morning, make my own cup of coffee, sit on the porch, listen to the birds, and tend to my rose bushes. To me, that's happiness. What saddens them most isn't illness, it's feeling dismissed, feeling treated as if they're no longer capable of understanding what's happening to their own bodies. They want doctors to look them in the eye, to explain things clearly, without big medical words, and not make decisions for them just because they're old. Older adults aren't seeking immortality, they're seeking respect. They're seeking the feeling that they're still in charge of their own lives, even in the smallest things. And when we give them clear information, when we meet them with honesty and heart, we're not just giving them medical facts, we're giving them the chance to live a life of fullness, independence, and dignity that they so deeply deserve.
There's one thing I really want you to remember deep in your heart. Not every test is bad, but not every test is truly necessary. You and I, we've lived through decades, seen ups and downs, our bodies have weathered thousands of changes. But that doesn't mean every time you see a doctor, every time you go in for a checkup, you need to say yes to every single test they suggest. What matters most isn't how many tests you do. What matters is whether you feel strong enough to ask questions. When your doctor says, "We'd like to run this extra test just to be sure," you have every right to smile and gently ask, "Do I really need this? What happens if we wait? Is there a gentler option? What's the risk? What's the benefit?" Let me tell you, these little questions, they can change your life. I've seen more than a few patients go in for a routine test only to end up in a long road to recovery. An 80-year-old man had a routine endoscopy for mild bloating, woke up from sedation confused. His blood pressure had dropped dangerously low because no one asked about his blood thinner meds. A healthy older woman agreed to a stress test just to check her heart. But halfway through, she got dizzy, and by the next day, she had a mild stroke. I'm not sharing these stories to scare you. I'm sharing them to remind you, pausing to ask, to understand, is never a sign of weakness. It's the mark of someone strong, someone smart, someone who values themselves and wants to protect their wellness, their independence, their peace of mind. Because you deserve more than just treatment. You deserve to be heard, to have choices, to live safely, joyfully, confidently. You know what I admire most about older adults? It's not their age, not even how much they've been through. It's their quiet resilience, that quiet strength, that persistence. But sometimes, even the strongest among us suffer in silence. They don't ask, they don't push, because they're afraid of being seen as a burden or being called fussy or fragile. Let me say this clearly. You are not fragile for being cautious. You are strong, so strong, because you stand up for yourself. When you ask your doctor, "Is this really necessary?" When you say, "Please help me understand this better," you are not being difficult. You are being wise. You are exercising your right to know, your right to choose. Imagine this. A doctor's appointment is no longer a scene where the doctor talks and the patient just listens. It becomes a conversation where two people sit down together to figure out the best way for you to stay well, to stay fulfilled, to live with vitality and joy. You are not a bystander. You are a partner. And a good doctor isn't someone who just gives orders. A good doctor listens, explains, and respects you. You deserve that. You deserve to live with health, freedom, and happiness. You deserve to enjoy quiet afternoons with your partner, to hear your grandchildren laugh, to tend to your garden, to live in connection, to feel resilient and fulfilled. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be understood. You deserve to be loved. And starting today, please believe this with all your heart. Your caution, your thoughtful questions, your confidence to speak up, those are the greatest gifts you can give to yourself and to the people who love you.